Hello everyone, I'm Rob Gurney, Managing Director of Oakrasoft, part of the Landmark Information Group. I'm really pleased to be supporting the National Conveyancing Week. To explain my background a little, just prior to taking this role I spent 24 years in the residential property industry, from being a fresh-faced assistant fee earner to becoming a slightly less fresh-faced senior director and chairman of a very large law firm, as well as doing a 9-year stint as a non-exec at the CLC. So I think I can offer some pretty well-informed thoughts on the topic of the day, which is all about the increase in often non-legal conveyancer responsibilities and the wider impact this has on our profession. A recent survey published in today's Conveyancer noticed that 82% of those polled expressed concern that conveyancing was becoming too complex. But before we start having a think about these additional responsibilities and their cumulative effect that they have on transactions, it's worth considering how things used to be. So let's rewind 20 years or so and recall what a conveyancer's job used to involve. I think we would all agree that fundamentally our role was to check the legal title of a property and carry out a local authority search on behalf of the buyer client, and then ensure that the security was acceptable for our lender client. We'd then agree a date, exchange contracts, ensure funds transfer took place and keys were released. It all seemed so logical and straightforward. And yes, I'm oversimplifying here, but I'm making this point deliberately to highlight that this is still what everyone else currently thinks that conveyancers do. With the advent of various financial fraud concerns, anti-money laundering and more onerous concerns in the mortgage market, we have many new duties that have seemingly defaulted onto the conveyancer's plate, without passing through the wider market consciousness. There's very little appreciation of the level of detail and the sheer number of checks and processes that have been added onto the fundamentals over the years. And this, I'm convinced, is a big reason as to why clients, estate agents, mortgage brokers, everyone else in the world have often unrealistic expectations when it comes to timescales. But anyway, let's have a little look at what we can genuinely say has been added to the job spec over the past 20 years or so. Firstly, and probably most importantly, is the way we need to identify our clients. Long gone are the days where we obtain a piece of primary and secondary ID, clip a copy of each to our file and tick the relevant box on our file cover. Property fraud and AML regulations are both huge considerations now, and the expectations of lenders, regulators and PI insurers have vastly changed as a result. We've inherited responsibilities to meet increased levels of due diligence, whether that be standard or enhanced, and our ongoing monitoring of our clients throughout the transaction. We should never underestimate how time-consuming this process can be, or the consequences of getting it wrong. Second on my list is checking the money that is being used in the transaction. Again, anyone thinking that obtaining a copy of a bank statement is fulfilling this requirement is very much mistaken. The lawyer is now expected to not just obtain proof of funds, but legitimise, investigate and satisfy themselves as to the authenticity of their origin and dig as deep as is necessary to remove any doubts. Sometimes this can be simple, other times a complete nightmare. Carrying on down the list, we've got solar panels and the additional legal complexities that these create depending upon ownership and financing of the installation. Japanese knotweed and whether any professional treatment plan is adequate for both the purchaser and their lender to continue. HS2 and whether the property will become blighted in the future due to the positioning of the proposed route and the disturbance it will cause. The Building Safety Act, the latest burden to hit the conveyancer. Not only do they need to ensure that all qualifying buildings have the appropriate certificates, there are also varying lenders' requirements which all unfortunately rest with the conveyancer too. Which brings me nicely onto the spiralling and ever-changing requirements contained within each lender's Part 2 of the UK Finance Lenders Handbook, 129 lenders and counting. It would be impossible for conveyancers to know each of these differing requirements, even if they remain static, which they don't. Septic tanks is next, and other private drainage systems that are subject to regulations. Are environmental permits required? Are the appropriate easements in place, etc.? SDLT. This has become a bit of a farce now, hasn't it? We used to be able to calculate stamp duty by just looking at a very straightforward chart, and now there's so many variations and complexities to consider, we appear to have adopted the role of expert tax advisor too. Environmental concerns. These have slowly increased over the years, and with them comes additional checks to conduct and reports to interpret. Issues such as land contamination, flood risk, and energy infrastructure have all become vital considerations for property lawyers. So there's just a snapshot of my list, and I'm almost certain we could collectively add to this tenfold. A couple of general observations from me. Firstly, I want to highlight a potential double whammy here, as if any information is needed to consider each additional responsibility, this inevitably leads to further inquiries being raised with the other side's lawyer, which will result in even further delays. According to our statistics here at Microsoft, the time it takes for the additional inquiries process to be concluded has increased from 27 days in 2010 to 56 days in 2022. And whilst I acknowledge that this process often runs concurrently with many others during the transaction, I'm sure it's no coincidence that the number of additional requirements placed upon conveyancers in the intervening years has directly impacted the time it takes for additional inquiries to be satisfied. Secondly, fees. And setting aside any discussion over the fees that conveyancers might be charging for their services, in the context of the particular topic we're focusing on today, just consider this one fact. Fees have not increased in line with each new responsibility that we've been burdened with. Lastly, I wanted to comment on client expectations, since all this is in complete contrast to what home movers anticipate. We're increasing the burden upon the lawyer whilst omitting to help the client see and understand why the instant results they desire are not yet possible. The ultimate goal must surely be instant communication and instant answers. Yet the gap between expectation and reality widens with each new requirement that's placed upon the conveyancer. This has got to be the main reason why the profession reports that keeping customers happy is becoming increasingly difficult. Okay, so, although I've not been asked to comment on the solution to this worrying conundrum, this is meant to be a spotlight piece highlighting the issue. It feels wrong of me to leave this recording without at least sharing a little of my hopes for what might help us reverse the trend and bring about the harmonisation between expectation and reality. Firstly, I'm a big believer in technology aiding conveyancing, and I'm convinced that the industry should be ready to embrace tech solutions that will genuinely offer quicker, more complete data, which must lead to faster turnaround times. Change is coming, and we need to adapt to new possibilities rather than resist the inevitable. When I talk to my counterparts in Landmark on the estate agency and lending systems side, we can all tell you that we're working towards changing this and can all adapt to new possibilities that will make our lives justifiably easier. Secondly, perhaps more immediately, we need to get this message out there. Conveyancing is becoming ever more demanding. We need to educate everyone connected in the property industry that we don't just check legal papers and agree dates between us. We never did just do that, but we now have so many additional responsibilities to discharge, and the combined effect is huge. Getting everyone else to genuinely understand and appreciate that might just make the difference. It may even help move some of this work to more appropriate places, things we desperately need right now and are already working on. I have an analogy to offer. Wouldn't it be ridiculous to expect the same person to do a 1,000-piece jigsaw in the same time it took them to do a 500-piece jigsaw? Finally, I'd like to personally thank Rob Hailstone for the National Conveyancing Week initiative. I sincerely hope this is the start of making a real difference. Thanks for watching, and all the best.